Hey everybody, welcome to the Brandenburg Church of God here on One Howard Drive in Brandenburg, Kentucky. I'm Alex, and I have got with me today the man, the myth, the legend, the one and only Brother Randy Johnson. Randy, welcome to the Brandenburg Church of God. Welcome to Brandenburg. You visited this area often? First time visiting the town?
No. You mean since I left the last time?
Since you left the last time. Yeah. For those who don't know, you, of course, Randy, were the pastor of this church here for how many years?
Right at 24, but I was here in the area just right close to 26 years.
Wow.
As I semi-retired, stepped down as a lead pastor. And, of course, Brother Luke came in to pastor, the senior pastor there. Still lived in the parsonage. Still had some responsibilities and duties, not many. But it was right at 26 years total being here in Brandenburg.
Wow. So you got here in what? I can't do the math in my head. What year was that?
I'm a guy because I'm not good at dates, so I don't know when we got here. 90 something, 90.
90 something. Well,
yes.
That's good enough. Yeah. Well, that's a long time, to be the pastor of a church in one place. How do you? Yeah. And if I'm getting too personal here, you don't have to answer anything, but just knock me upside the head or whatever. But how do you be the pastor of a church? One church, same community. Obviously, people are going to come and go, and some are going to be different. Some of the people are going to be the same, though. But the same church for that many years, 24 years, and not get burnout.
Well, that's a really good question. I'm not exactly sure how you define burnout. There was times being here of great joy, then there was times of being like down in the valley as well. I think once a pastor stays at a church a certain amount of time, there are people that do come and go, but then there's people that stick with you as well. And you get into, I guess, maybe a relationship with those folks. People come and go. I think that once you reach that level of being there a certain amount of time, and you build that friendship and relationship with some of the people in church, you know them, they know you. You know their faults, you know their character, they know you. I think it's much easier to stay. A lot of times a pastor will go to a church and they have a honeymoon period. Mm-hmm. They're new, they like their style, they like the way they preach, and it's a honeymoon. You get along with everybody. You have a good time. Folks are always patting you on the back and telling you what a great job you're doing. And that can last a year, 6 months, year and a half, 2 years. But there comes a time when that honeymoon period wears off. And it's back to the grind. You begin to have problems in the church. Problems crop up. You have clashes with people's egos, different characteristics. And you have to get down to the nitty-gritty and work. The honeymoon is over. Lots of times, a pastor, when they reach that point of having to deal with problems and deal with issues, and now they've got either the church council or members breathing down their neck, wanting this, wanting that, don't like this, don't like that. That comes a time when a lot of pastors question, is this where I'm supposed to be? If they can make it through that part, that initial time when the honeymoon's over, and stick with it, eventually life of the church smooths out, and you're always going to have problems, but the sailing is much smoother.
When we went through the credentialing process a while back, myself and some others here in the church, they started off by showing us a lot of statistics on pastors and preachers, folks who will get into the ministry and then they'll leave. The numbers, the statistics on that are just absolutely crazy, because it's a tough, first, and I think this is a lesson for anybody who's a Christian, because anybody who's a Christian is called to some sort of ministry, and people kind of freak out when they hear the word ministry, because you think of ministry, you think of preaching, you think of evangelizing, you think of teaching, you think of pastoring, but ministry is so much more than that, as we know. Doing a food pantry can be a ministry, doing a, whatever, there's different members of the body, everybody's called to do something, but it's hard sometimes. Serving the Lord is hard sometimes. Just keeping going. And, for somebody like you, I think you probably got a lot of wisdom to share from being, even in one place for 24 years. What do you do in those times? You talk about the honeymoon period being over. What do you do to keep yourself going? Because sometimes I would imagine, you probably feel like you're the, maybe you and God and hopefully your spouse, are the only ones who are, on your team probably doing ministry. How do you keep yourself going?
And that happens. It really does. There's times when here in Brandenburg, not so much where I am now, because I'm still in that honeymoon phase. It's been a little over 2 years.
Yeah.
So it's still like the honeymoon phase there.
Yeah.
But you mentioned something earlier there when you first started talking about that, about churches and ministers leaving. The church in America, a large church is considered having members or regular attendance, I think, more than 75. That's considered a large church. Most churches in America are made up of membership in churches much smaller than that. It's easy to get discouraged because the smaller the crowd, the less people you have to do the work of the ministry. So it usually falls upon the pastor and his wife to do a lot of stuff. And it can be frustrating at times. And that frustration can lead ministers to question whether they were called or not. Lots of times they think, well, if I was called of God, why is this happening? Why no progress? Why am I not seeing any growth? Mm-hmm. So it can cause them to question whether they was even called. I don't know what the statistics are, but I think it's something like 1,500 pastors leave the ministry every month in America because they are burned out or they're just simply disappointed with the church that they pastor or their ministry.
And that's the devil loves that too, because that's the devil's goal is, to me, I think, when the attacks are coming or when, it's difficult, that's actually more proof to me of the calling. That's more proof sometimes that you're on the right path, because the devil sees that you're on the right path. He sees what you're doing. We've got a very real spiritual enemy. The Bible talks about that. And when there's principalities, we fight not against flesh and blood, but against those principalities, those rulers of spiritual darkness. And there are very real demons out there. There are very real forces of evil out there that are seeing what these people are doing. They see that you're doing something for the Lord. They know you're on the right track, and they're going to try to discourage you. They're going to try to stop you and do whatever you can. So when the attacks come, it's almost like it can be difficult to see that in the moment, but you look back on it and you're like, man, I'm kind of encouraged by that.
Well, see, I tend to look at it as the same way, but many times those spiritual attacks come through members of the church unknowingly. And like you, whenever there's a problem comes up, I'm determined. If it's a problem, I don't question my calling. I don't question whether am I supposed to be here? If I was, would this happen? I see that as a challenge by the enemy. So what's my duty? My duty is to rise above that. But it is discouraging, and I've had that happen here in 24 years, not mentioning any names or anything, but well-meaning and good-intentioned members. If something was going on in the church, or if something happened to me personally, or if something was going on in my life, lots of times, well, maybe not lots of times, but it was regular that some member would come and question my calling or question, well, are you doing the right thing? Maybe that's happening because you're not in God's will. Maybe you should pray and look. And it's aggravating when they do that, because that can be equally discouraging as well. But I see those challenges, and I see those obstacles, and I see those problems in the church as being a challenge that we must rise above this. And I don't see it as, well, if I was doing God's will, that wouldn't be happening, because we know that's not the case. Take a look at the Apostle Paul. Everything that happened in his life, he had his own family come against him. He had his friends, his own countrymen, he said, came against him. But he was in God's will. So being in God's will and having problems is not a sign that everything is going wrong and you need to just stop what you're doing.
Yeah, you talk about the attacks sometimes coming from well-meaning and well-intentioned people. They don't realize, what they're doing, but the devil can use those people. That may sound harsh to people, but that's biblical. I always think about Peter. When that famous line, "Get behind me, Satan." Well, who did Jesus say that to? He said it to one of his own. It was Peter, and it's not that Peter was possessed by the devil or something like that, but the devil can influence the thoughts and actions even of Christians with the Holy Spirit.
Well, see, I think that's an excellent point. And Jesus wasn't speaking to Peter. It was not the Peter. It wasn't Peter that was the problem. It was the spirit and the motivation behind Peter, which was the enemy, Satan. Mm-hmm. So when Jesus spoke, he wasn't saying, Peter, you're a problem here with me. He said, no, Satan's the problem. Get behind me, Satan, because Satan was motivating Peter to do what Peter was doing.
Yeah. Well. Okay. So we talked a little bit about, motivation. You keep yourself motivating. These attacks come. You're here for a long time. At what point do you finally, how does that decision come about? I mean, I know for everybody it's going to be a little bit different. Maybe you could talk about you personally, but just in general, how does one come to that conclusion and figure out, okay, is this just me getting discouraged and feeling like I want to leave versus, no, this is what the Lord's saying. It's time for me to go. It's time for me to move somewhere else, to do something else.
I think it can be both. Sometimes it can be neither. For me personally, it does come with some discouragement with me, not with anything going on, but with me. And I really do think that you have to be in tune with and maintain a good, vibrant spiritual prayer relationship with God, or you may miss that. With me, it did come with despair with me. I did question what I was doing. I did question why I was seeing the things that I was seeing. And I talked to my wife about that and shared with her. Did a lot of prayer. And in my prayer life and talking with God, I reached a point where I truly believed that my time at that particular church was done. And God allowed me to see different things to confirm my belief in that. So I never acted upon any of that. There was times of discouragement that I didn't think it was time to go. But then there was that one time when it was a time of discouragement for me personally. And I questioned God, talked with God, and spent weeks and weeks and weeks making sure. And when I come to the part of believing that it was God saying, it's time. It's time. You've done what you can. You've done all you can. I have another work. Only then did I say, hey, I'm done here.
That's got to be difficult, though. As a pastor, you're a shepherd over the people. And so, part of your job is to lead the church, to protect the church, to care for the church. And then to say, well, after 24 years, I'm going to go somewhere else. That's got to be like difficult, because some of the people, I know when you left, some of the people that were here early on were probably still here. Some of them were gone, but some of them were still here. And a lot of the families, you watch some of these people grow up, and I don't mean to make it emotional or anything, but that's got to be a difficult thing to do.
It is. Because 24, 25, 26 years, even longer, you do build relationships, though, folks, and you see some of the children being born, and then you see those children grow up and graduate and then get married and have children of your own, and as a shepherd, you become attached to those families, and many times, especially in the case with a pastor who is away from where he was born and raised and away from his family, he becomes part of their families, and they grow together. And so when you leave, it's like you're leaving your family again, and it is difficult. But at the same time, if you know that God has a different calling and a different work for you, then you must, as difficult as it is, you must listen to the voice and the will of God.
What's it like now, after spending all that time here, shepherding the people, pastoring this church, leading this church for so many years, and then you go away, you're now pastoring a church somewhere else, you've got a new flock of people down there. They love you, I know, and you love them as well. But what's it like now that you step back into the church? Because you've come back and you visited. There've been occasions, funerals, and weddings, and things, and just sometimes you come back. Like today, you're back here physically in the church. What's it like coming back and not only stepping back into your old church, but seeing all the changes that have been made? Because there's been a lot of changes and a lot of new things that are happening here at the church. What's that like?
Different. When I first took the other church and came back within a matter of a month, maybe a month and a half, I missed everything. I'd see everything. So just things that I liked before, and I'd see that, and I'd get happy, and I missed it. Then I got to see some of the people at weddings, come by for weddings, come by for some funerals, and got to see those folks, and it was like, I don't want to say nostalgia, but it was like I'm back again. Mm-hmm. But then as time went on, I'd come back, and a lot of the things that hadn't appealed to me when I was here, as time went on, a lot of those things kind of like lost its appeal. Not the people, but the stuff that I did, the things I saw, the places that I went. It just wasn't the same anymore. So the appeal of wanting to be here and missing it become less and less.
What do you think it is about people that, we can all do it. We're all guilty of it probably sometimes. We get so caught up in the tradition of things or the way things were, the way things have been, and we can be so resistant to changes sometimes.
Change is hard. Because nobody likes change.
You get comfortable, don't you?
We do get comfortable, and we know what we have. So we don't want to rock the boat because we think if something changes, it's not going to be the same, and I may not like it. I like what we got now. I like the routine. I like everything that we're doing. So when somebody says, well, let's do something different, well, wait a minute. Change is not always accepted, and it is difficult to bring change about. Especially, and I feel bad. I feel bad. Anybody's watched this that's a pastor and had to follow somebody that's been there 25, 26, or in my case 30 years, because the people get attached to that guy, and the new pastor coming in, he's not like that guy. He's not like the old preacher, and everybody mentions the old preacher. Every time you're with somebody, they bring up the old preacher's name multiple times. Talk about the old preacher, how he used to preach, what he used to do. I truly feel sorry for the new pastor that comes in that's following a minister that has been there a long time. Let me come back to that. Longevity can breed stability and success in a church. The longer a pastor stays, but it's not guaranteed. Just because you got a pastor that's been there 30 years is no guarantee that the church is going to be much more successful 30 years later it was the day he got there. It's not a guarantee, but it certainly is a good thing. The longer a pastor stays with the church, the more he becomes used to the people, the more they can work together, and it can breed and build a strong, successful church. Longevity can. Mm-hmm. Now, let me go back to that. I feel bad for the minister who comes to a church and he's new, and the guy has been there 20 or 30 some years. They compare the new one to the old one, and the new one never measures up. He just can't, because he's a new guy. Once the new wears off, it's like down to routine again. Honeymoon's over, and he ain't nothing like the old pastor, and that can create a lot of headaches for the new pastor, because he hears the old pastor's name repeatedly. He knows he's nothing like that guy, but he knows he's a good guy, and he can pick up where the old former pastor left off, and he can pick up the baton and keep going. But getting that mesh together with the congregation is so difficult. It's hard. And would it be okay to mention the church that I pastor on this venue here?
Well, no, we don't mention any other churches here. We're very strict about that.
Then I won't mention.
Only publicize. No, of course, of course.
Well, the Vico Church of God.
Well, they're in our family even. They're the church.
So they're the Church of God.
Oh,
okay, so they'll see this too. The Vico Church of God has been there. It was established in 1932. We're coming up on a 100-year anniversary in just a few years. The church has a long history. The church has an absolute excellent name within that community. Mm-hmm. Wherever I go, because the church has been there for quite a while, wherever I go, 15, 20 miles, even as far as Pikeville and over to London, which is an hour away, if I'm there any length of time in those towns talking to people, and eventually I'll turn the conversation something spiritual and mention church, I have run into people that somehow have been connected to the Vico Church of God.
Wow.
They've either attended that church, they went there when they were a kid, or their grandparents helped start that church. So the church has an excellent name in that community because over the years they have reached out in the community. I guess back years ago, back in the maybe 60s, 50s, 70s, the church was probably a little larger in the congregation perhaps than what it is now. But they had several ministers there. Claiborne Johnson got a plaque up on the wall with his picture. He was there about 10 years. Church loved the man, a great guy. I knew him. And he did a lot to help push that church, lead the church forward and make the church even more stable. Another fellow there, a lot of people there in that area watching this, Bert McGrainer. Bert McGrainer was there 30 years or longer. And I've heard his name a lot. Great man, heard a lot of great things about him. But he's there for a long time, and people got used to him. So whenever somebody wants to change something, it's usually not accepted well because that's not the way they've always, that's not the way we've done it for 30 years. But without change, there'll be no progress. Things have to change. And the church, some of the members see this, they're either going to laugh at me or get upset. They still have pictures hanging on the wall of people that they supported for missions from 1983. Still hanging on. The guy's probably gone on to meet his reward, but nobody wants to take the picture down because they knew that guy came to church and preached. They supported him a long time. But if there is no change, there probably won't be any progress. Things can't stay the same. Things always must change. And change is not always accepted. And we don't change things just for the sake of changing things. I mean, if it needs change, maybe something's not working, or maybe if you just want to try something different, that you've done the same thing all these years or over and over, and it's worked, but maybe it could be better, then you might want to try something different. But change is not always readily accepted.
Yeah, well, I mean, you gotta evolve with the times, first of all. I mean, culture around us changes, the world around us changes, and, they, in the Bible, I mean, they would do things according to their culture, according to what they were doing. We can't expect that we're going to be able to have, our grandmother's church and do the exact same things that our grandmother's generation did. And it's going to continue to be successful, and it's going to continue to be, advancing the gospel, because that culture, it just doesn't exist anymore. We may want it to exist. We may, reminisce and think, oh man, I wish that those times existed. Really, I think that's what it is. If something changes, I think, maybe even the paint colors, or even the, whatever it is, just, cosmetic things. People can get upset about those things in a church or whatever. You're attaching the paint color. It's not that people hate the paint color. It's not that people hate the new whatever.
You're changing
new
mom and daddy's church, or you're changing grandma's church.
Yeah, it's exactly. It's attached to the memories, and I can get that. I can understand that.
I can too. 'Cause I'm a pack rat. I like to keep stuff, little mementos, and I don't want to throw any of that away. And that can be compared to that. If you're throwing away the old color paint, you're getting a new color paint, and folks just don't like that.
Yeah, people, I think about hymnals, because I know like here we've gone from hymnals to we'll have the lyrics up on the screen, which it's convenient. It's I think most churches probably do that now, projected onto the wall somehow, or have a TV screen up there or whatever. People will sometimes be like, oh man, it just feels like church when I've got that hymnal. It just feels like, it just feels like church when I've got the red back hymnal there, because that's what I'm used to. That's what it was like in Grandma's church. That's what, it just feels like church. It don't feel like church when I'm,
singing off the wall.
Yeah, I'm singing off the wall. It's a TV on the wall. What, that's just crazy. But meanwhile, worshiping, we're fumbling through pages and trying to find the right page, and and it can hinder it. But we just attach that, I think, to a memory of when we were a kid, or when we were going to church with grandma, or when we were, whatever the case may be. It's not that we hate the thing or the new thing. It's just, I think, change can be difficult.
It can, and a lot of churches today, let's face it, things have changed. A lot of church members don't even bring their Bible anymore. That's changed. A few years ago, 25, 30, 40 years ago, that was not the case. Everybody brought their Bible. Not so much anymore. So I think a lot of churches, when the pastor would say, turn in your Bible to, well, they're just looking at one another because they don't have a Bible, unless there's one in the pew. So churches started with the TVs, putting the scripture up on the wall so everybody could see that and everybody could read it.
Yeah.
But that's not was readily accepted either. And I've even had people say, you get rid of that read by Kim book, I'm quitting church.
Yeah.
But remember, at one time, that read by Kim book was new also. That was a change.
That is. Have you ever read that article? Billy Graham had a great article that he had submitted to a newspaper years ago, where he was talking about some of that about the music, because that's another thing too, like the style of music. You know, sometimes the newer songs. You know, churches incorporate a lot of the newer songs today, and some people can have some resistance to that because it's like, oh, well, that's not Amazing Grace. That's not I'll Fly Away. That's not the songs I remember from my childhood. But you know, Billy Graham was talking about that years ago. You know, and about how, you know, those songs, those hymns that you love so much, those were new at some point too. I mean, you know, in the beginning, God did not create the heavens and earth and the song Amazing Grace, you know, and the redback hymnal. Yeah, no, exactly.
I think that's true. And I don't mean anything sacrilegious about this, but as the culture changes, the church is going to change as well. And you get a lot of resistance from the folks that's been there for a long time and they're used to things being done one way. Eventually, and again, don't mean this bad, eventually those folks are going to go on to their great reward. They're going to leave the church by way of, you know, the grave. So the newer folks that come in that's not really used to singing the traditional songs, they're going to be more inclined to gravitate toward the church that does offer the singing on the screens and has a different style of church, the way the church is decorated. A lot of churches aren't decorated like the traditional churches used to be. They're just not. So as the older saints go to be with Jesus, the newer people today that's being saved and won to the church have a different way of doing things, different way of worship. So the church of yesteryear, I think, is being phased out of the church of today. But if Jesus tarries and soon doesn't return, then 30, 40 years from now, the church is going to look different than what the church does today as well.
All right. Well, thank you guys for tuning in. Don't forget the goal of this podcast is typically, you know, to address some things about the Bible and theology and apologetics and address your questions. We always are happy to take your questions. If you've got anything that you'd like us to talk about in a future episode, it'll be myself and you know, maybe Pastor Luke or maybe Brandon or maybe somebody else or maybe Randy will come back and do another episode with us sometime. I don't know. But we appreciate you tuning in, and don't forget to subscribe on the YouTube channel and follow us for the future episodes. Love you guys. God bless.